Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, thanks, Logan. So just before we get into the live demo, I'll do a quick introduction. My name is BeeJay, or well, Brian Johnstone is my actual name, but most people know me by my nickname, BeeJay. I'm the one on the right in this photo. And the interesting fact for me, before I get started on the demo, is that I, way back in the year 2000, took part in an international decathlon with people from around the world and managed to come first place. You might be thinking of me doing things like running and jumping and throwing a javelin, but it was more like this. It was a decathlon on 10 classic arcade video games. So yeah, that's an interesting fact about me. On to the next session, live demo. So we've got the style tile from Logan. So what's next? We need to turn that into a jade skin. What's involved in doing that? So I've got here a copy of MS Paint, which was my tool of choice for cutting out the pictures. And if I zoom in a bit, and I'll go across to the right where we had the minimize, maximize, etc. widgets. And so literally what I would do is click on the select icon up here on the toolbar and go down and drag the mouse around. And I had to be accurate, so if I deliberately miss, even by a pixel, we can see there I was correct on the bottom, but all the other three sides I missed by a pixel. So in Windows Paint, I'd have to click away and then take a bit more care and make sure I get my selection so it's covering exactly the button and nothing else. And then I'd copy that, and then I'd go into another copy of Paint, paste that in, resize it so it's just that button, and then save that to somewhere on my machine with a suitable name. But of course, if you've been network connected and now you're not on your laptop, it can take quite some time for the save dialog to come up on MS Paint, as is happening now. So I'll just pause this and I'll come back shortly. Okay, so you didn't have to sit through that whole couple of minutes. It's come up with the save dialog. So I'd give it a suitable name and save it in a suitable location. And then I'd swap back to my other paint and I'd select the next bit. And so I'd have to drag the selection around, copy that, go back to the other paint, paste it in, and then I'm not going to do it this time because it took so long last time, do a save as and give it a slightly different name. And so I'd have to repeat that once for each of those buttons. So I'll just get rid of that paint. So as you can see, there's 4 minimize states, there's 4 of the restore states, there's 4 maximize buttons, and there's 4 terminate buttons. So you can imagine it took quite some time to cut out all those buttons. But it got even worse when we start looking at some of these other buttons, and I'll just zoom in a little bit bigger if I can. No, that's maximum zoom. So that's another thing. There was only so far I could zoom in, and what I would have to do is try and just get my selection to cover just that top left, and you can see, once again, I've gone too far to the right. So with curved borders, it became even harder to mark out the area you wanted to cut out. I did learn a trick though, which was to start at the bottom left corner and go up to the top right corner. And then basically I'd have a 8x8 square, and then I'd copy that and I'd save that as the top left for the button. I'd have to repeat that for the top right, the bottom left. I'll just get the cursor so you can see it a bit better. The bottom left, repeat it for the left side, the right side, the top strip, and the bottom strip, and then also the inner image. And so there was 9 images, and then there's 4 button states. And if I zoom out a bit more, there's buttons that are normal and priority over a grey background and over top of a dark background. So there were 3 different versions of each button style, and then for each button style there were 4 different images. So as you can imagine, it gets up to quite a lot. And so a typical skin would involve cutting out between 1,500 and 2,500 individual little PNG files. So that's great. I've cut them all out into the little files. I've actually got a folder here that I prepared earlier. So we can see I've cut out the 9 images. So BL is my code for bottom left, bottom right, the bottom strip, the inner, the left strip, the right strip, top left, top right, and top strip. And in fact, if I change that to a icon view, you can see what the buttons look like. So we've got the curve of the bottom left and the curve of the bottom right, etc. So that's great. What's the next thing to do? The next thing to do is to load those into the Jade Skin Maintenance form. So I'll just swap to an app and bring up the Jade Skin Maintenance form. So with the Skin Maintenance form, if we have a look at a control button and go to button, we can see that we've got an up state, a disabled state, a down state, focus, focus down, roll over, and roll under. So there's potentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 states. Now each of these options in the combo box is a window state image. So you have to create the window state images, and then you can use those to create the up and etc. states for the button. So let's go into the window state image, and let's create a new skin, and let's call it TOI 2020 BeeJay button up, because I'm doing the up state of the button. And we can see over on the right, we've got these 9 different images. I could load them in one at a time and select the list and hit set, but it's quicker to hit set all. But when I say quicker, it does take time for that dialog to come up to show me the files I want to select. And if we watch in this little example box down here, we'll see the button start to build up as I set the images. So let's go ahead and click the set all button, and then we'll wait for the dialog to come up. And again, this looks like it's going to take some time, so I'll just pause the video and come back to you shortly. Okay, that dialog's come up, so now I can navigate into the folder where I had those 9 little images cut out. And so we can see this one is the top center strip, which is this ts.png. Now I know that the next thing it's going to ask for is the top left and the top right. So what I'm going to do is, as I double click to select each one, I'm going to see where the next image I want to be is. And so once I double click, I'm going to position the cursor or the mouse so that it's over top of that area. And that just makes it a little bit quicker for me. Each time the dialog comes up, I'm ready to just double click. And we're getting here, so do the left strip next, and then the right strip. So we can see down here the button's starting to take shape. We haven't got too many to go now. We'll do the bottom strip, which will be this area here, and then the bottom left, position it for the bottom right image. And now we've got the button looking more like a button, but we just need to set the inner picture. So I'll click the set inner picture button, grab the inner image. And now this is great. We've got a button that looks good. So that's the look we're after. Well, not quite. We've got the up state for the button. So I'd have to repeat this process for the down state, the disabled state, the rollover state, and potentially the focus, the roll under, which is when you roll over a 2-state button that's down, and the focus down, which is when it gets focused, when it's a 2-state button in the down state. So if I go back to the controls and have a look in this combo now, I can set the up one, but I can't set the disabled one because the only option available is the up window state that we just created. So I would now need to repeat that. And as you can probably imagine, that's going to take quite some time to go through and do all of those window states and all of those images. And so that's where I decided I need to be able to do a quicker load. So the first round of speeding this up was I came up with a naming convention and a folder structure that would allow me to write a script that would go through and load all those images. So that meant instead of it taking several days to load all of the images for all of the different types of buttons and all of the different types of additional controls, the script would load all of them in just a few seconds, or actually a few milliseconds in some cases. So that was great. It got rid of having to use this JADE skin maintenance form to laboriously load all of the different cutout images that I needed to load to generate a skin. So yeah, it had improved things considerably, but I still had to go through that manual process with MS Paint, cutting them out, and every so often Windows would issue a new version of Paint which interfered with some of the shortcuts I'd come to use and to mangle it and make it quick. In fact, Gray and Logan, who presented earlier, used to say that they couldn't believe how quickly I was able to do stuff in MS Paint. They called me the MS Paint guru. But I didn't want to be doing that all along, all the time. So that's where I came up with the concept of Dermott. So this is Dermott. It's completely blank at the moment, and I'm just going to create a new skin with this, and I'm going to call it BeeJay TOI 2020 Dermott Demo. Nice long name, but that'll do. And then I'm going to click this browse button beside this thumbnail of an image, and I'm going to load in that skin image that we were looking at, the buttons previously. So that's great. Now it's looking a little bit like MS Paint. I can zoom the image up, which is great, but I can quickly jump to the area I'm interested in by just clicking on the thumbnail. And this is the part that I really like. So I'm just going to drag a selection area out around that box. But as you can see, I was off again. Now in MS Paint, I'd have to click away and redo the selection. But because this is an app I wrote myself, I just gave myself the ability to nudge those lines. So that's now nudged it a whole lot quicker. So that was quicker to work out cut out one image. But it's even better than that. I'll get rid of that selection, and I'll do a bigger selection around all 4 states of that button. And again, I've missed by a little bit, and I can just nudge that. So that's great. I've mapped out an area that covers all 4 of those buttons. I'll now just map out an area that's the inside button, and we can see that there, in fact I got it right the first time, so I don't need to nudge it, is now covering the whole of that minimize button And on my context menu, right-click, I can replicate that horizontally, which would bring it over top of here, vertically, which would bring it to this one, or both, which would put it over all three, which is what I want to do. So I go replicate both. I've now marked out all 4 of those images in one hit. So that's quicker than it was with MS Paint. It gets better than that though. I've got these other images that are similar size and laid out in the same way. So I'm just going to take that inner one, make a copy of it over to here. Again, I don't have to be exact because I can just nudge it into the right place afterwards. So that's those 8 buttons images done. We'll come down here and do this one next. Nudge that down. We've now done 12, and I'll do the terminate button as well. Now the terminate button's a little bit different because it's got the right-hand border of the form as part of it. So I need to make the outer area 2 pixels larger, which I can do. And then each of the inner areas that are cutting out the actual images, each of those also needs to just become 2 pixels wider. That one on the right-hand edge, and those 2 on the left-hand edge. So now I've done all 4 of those. Okay, so I've done that part of it. How do I actually apply those to a skin? Well, these are form elements that I've been cutting out. So if I drop down my element combo, I'm going to select that I'm doing the form and what I want the form to look like. And we can see there's a general settings, which is things like what fonts and colors and things to use for the menus, caption offsets, etc. And on the image setting tabs, we can load up what we're going to use for the form border. I'm not actually going to go through the whole skin process, but I'm going to show you down here. This is where the minimize, maximize, and restore buttons are done. So I'll just zoom back out a little bit more so I can see all of them at once. So this is the minimize button. I'm just going to drag that over top of any of these 4 squares that represent the minimize button. And Dermott knows how to identify the top left is always the up, the top right is always the rollover, the bottom left is always the down state, and the bottom right is always the disabled state. So it's inferred that and showed me what those 4 states look like. I'm going to repeat that with the restore button, the maximize button, and also the terminate button. Okay, so that's done it inside Dermott, but if I was to go to the skin maintenance form, there's nothing to show yet. In fact, why don't I do that right now? Go to the skin maintenance, have a look at the forms. We have no skin forms at the moment, but I'm going to go back to Dermott now and hit the generate skin button, and that's now completed. It's that quick. So that was the equivalent of loading all the marked out areas one at a time through the JADE skin maintenance form. So that was pretty quick. If I go back to skin maintenance, we've now got a demo form. If I select that, it's not going to have any borders yet because we didn't load any images into the borders, but we can see the buttons up in the top right. They're already there. They've got the look and feel. If I maximize it up, we've got the restore button there. So they're all working and looking smaller versions than these are because I had this on Zoom, but they're all showing exactly what I cut out and marked up. So that's great. It's looking a whole lot better and a whole lot easier. Let's go and have a look at these other buttons. And I said that they were really problematic. And again, I'll just zoom in so I can make it easier to mark up the areas that I want to mark up. And I'll just bring one of those buttons into view. So I'm going to do a similar approach to what I did with the other 4 button states. I'm going to mark out the whole button area. And then I'm just going to mark up where the button, or approximately, because I can just nudge it left and right and nudge it a couple of times to get to all of the anti-aliased curves. So we've got a 8x8 image here, or an 8x8 area that we've marked out. Again, I'm going to right click and replicate that both horizontally and vertically. So now we've done all 4 corners of this button state. I'm going to drag out another area just here and make it 1 pixel tall and as wide as these buttons were. And then I'm going to replicate that one horizontally. So now we've got it over here, just like that. I'm going to do a 2x2 image up the top for the border, and then I'm going to replicate that vertically. So we've now got our bottom image. And then the last one to do is just the inner image. And again, I'll make it 2x2. Normally I only do 1 pixel if that's all I need, but I'm just making it larger so that it's easier for you to see that I've marked out these 9 images. I will now zoom back out again and show you we can do the same technique as we did with the other buttons. I'll just drag a copy of that over to the right, nudge it into the right place. That's the rollover state done for this button. Same again for over here. That's the down state done, and just the disabled state left. I'll bring it across and up. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 times 9. That's 36 images I just cut out. Again, that's just marked up the areas. I need to assign them to a button, so I will choose a button as the element I want to do. And we can see here we've got a picture control that's going to show what the images look like for the disabled, the down, the focus down, etc. Again, this is the up state, so I'm just going to drag that over the button up, and there we go. It's giving us a rendering of what that's going to look like. This is the rollover state, so I'm going to drag that to the rollover, and I'm also going to drag that to the focus, because we tend to give the same treatment to a button to mark it as the current button when you tab to it or when you roll the mouse over it. The down state I will put into button down, and then lastly the disable state into disable. So I've now associated those 45 images, because I used one lot of 9 images twice for 2 different states. Let's generate the skin. That's done. Let's go back to the skin maintenance form and go to the window state images first, and we can see there we've got 5 image states: disabled, down, focus, rollover, and up. And if I click on each of those, we'll see a sample of what they look like in the bottom right corner. And I'll repeat that. So the down's at the orange state, focus and rollover are the slightly lighter color. That's a darker orange, that's slightly lighter, and the up state's the black. And if I go back to the controls tab and select to have a look at a button, we can see here an example of the button. And if I click down, we can see the down state. Move the mouse off, we've got the up state. But you'll notice that if I take focus away from it, it's pretty hard to read that caption, because it's black text on a black background. So if we go back and have a look at the General Settings tab, I can say I want the default 4 color, and I'll just set it to be the white color that's right there at the top of the T. I'll hit Generate Skin again, and now if we go back and have a look at that button again in Skin Maintenance, it's now got the white text in all the states, which is much easier to read than the black text. So that's how simple it was to mark up a skin. Let's go and have a look at a sample skin, the JADE 2020 Neon skin, where all of the elements have been marked up. And if I have a look here, we can see that we've marked up what the status bar looks like. Go a bit further down, we've marked up what scroll bars should look like, and what the buttons should look like on the scroll bars for both horizontal and vertical scroll bars. We've marked out what the text fields should look like, what the combo box mandatory text fields would look like with the red bar down the left hand side, just to make them look more mandatory. There's check boxes, combo boxes, option buttons, radio buttons is more commonly called. So let's do a generate skin on that, and it will take a little bit longer to do this one because we've marked up every single type of button and control in all the states. And there we go, it's done. So let's go and have another look at the skin maintenance form. Let's have a look at window state images. Here we go. So it was in a save state. Okay, I'll just close and open a new skin maintenance form. It does that because I'm behind the scenes doing stuff that not via the skin maintenance form. It sometimes gets in a state that it doesn't allow for, and that's because I'm directly updating JADE metadata properties. So here we go. We've got a button, a folder button, horizontal grip bars and vertical grip bars. We've got a whole lot of simple buttons that have been created for that neon form. We've got the forms themselves, so this is what it looks like for the NDI frame. It's got the JADE 2020 and a big graphic at the top left, but on this child form, it's just got a smaller graphic and it doesn't have the JADE 2020. And that's so when you're looking at the JADE development environment, if you've got 5 child forms open, you don't have the visual clutter of the JADE 2020 on every one of those child forms. You can imagine if you had this 2020 and this big wide graphic repeated lots of times, it would start to get a bit overloading. Okay, so that's great, but where the power of Dermott really comes into it, and this is what we were saying with being able to do lots of different colors of skins for a client, but where all of the elements are the same size and positioned in the same place, I'm just going to make a copy of this JADE Neon 2020 and call it JADE 2020 BeeJay's Blues. Okay, so at the moment it's just an identical copy of JADE 2020. If I was to generate the skin, it would look exactly the same as the JADE 2020 Neon skin. But what I'm going to do is hit the Browse button and go and select the BeeJay's Blues skin. And now when I hit Generate Skin on that, it's done already. If we go back to, if we launch a skin maintenance form, skin maintenance, and have a look at the window state images, we now have a scroll bar because we've got all these BeeJay Blues buttons. We've got even more simple button skins, so it's starting to get quite a lot longer. And if we have a look at the forms, we can see what the BeeJay's Blues forms look like. So it's got different treatment for that one, and the MDI frame's got a different treatment for the 2020, etc. But what you will notice is that it's got this grey area that's appeared in the title bar, and that's because with that neon skin, it had quite a wide graphic, and it means that there's an area that's marked up here, which is quite wide, so we can see how far across this goes, and that was to get that wide graphic. So all I have to do is select that, and I'll just shrink that right-hand edge. So it's coming from the right, there we go, it's visible now, and I'm just going to take it so it goes beyond the point where that grey bar is. That should be enough. Hit generate skin now. That's done, and if we go back to the skin maintenance form again, and we go to the forms tab and have a look at that BeeJay's Blues MDI frame, that's fixed the MDI frame one, but we haven't fixed the child form. There must just be another area that's marked out for the child form, which is normally the case. The child forms normally have different treatment to the MDI frame, so there'll be another area where I just need to mark out a slightly smaller rectangle. There it goes there. So I will just bring that one across, and I'll make that just slightly wider than the J symbol. Let's generate the skin one last time, and go to the skin maintenance now, go to the forms tab, and the standard forms now missing that green bar, and the MDI frame is also missing that grey bar. Sorry, not green. So that's where the power of Dermott really comes into its own. Once we've marked up a skin, if we've got several other skins, ignoring the fact that I had to make this title bar narrower, what we've done for some other clients, one client in particular, we did 11 versions of their skin. Marking up the first one, I had to go through that process of marking up all the buttons and radio buttons, etc. But once that had been done and the client reviewed it and they were happy with the look of it, to generate out those other 11 skins, whilst it was more work for Logan's group to do the alternate colour schemes, for me, cutting them out with Dermott was a breeze. I just did exactly what we did there, did a copy of the one that I marked out originally, give it the new name, load up the new image, hit the generate button, repeat. So I could do 11 different versions of the skin very quickly for that client, and at a point where it was worthwhile, cost-wise, it wasn't going to be an exorbitant cost. It was also very useful where even doing the first cutout before we get into the multiple ones, the client might come back and say, oh, it's just a little bit dark, or we want that blue just a little bit lighter. If that meant that all the different buttons and things changed, the old way with MS Paint, I would have to manually recut out all those images. But of course with Dermott, it would be like doing a new version of the skin. I would just load in the updated color waves from Logan, the style tile, hit the generate button, extract the schemas again, send them to the client, and get them to sign off on it. So as you can imagine, it saved me a lot of time and effort, and certainly stopped me from pulling out the rest of my hair. Not there's much left. That was it. End of my video. Any questions?